Alright, welcome back everyone. So earlier today we had the part 2 stream for the 7th anniversary for Dragon Ball Legends. I never got a chance to cover part 1 of the anniversary, even though it is generally considered to be a pretty bad experience. But today we're gonna go ahead and talk about what this stream had to offer in terms of new game mechanics, in terms of new characters, and also we'll go ahead and talk about what the general player base for Dragon Ball Legends had to say as a community, because I'm gonna say as a bit of a mild spoiler right now, the community was kind of split in terms of the character choices. Some people loved it, but a lot of others did not feel really hype about the character choices. So today we're gonna go ahead and cover all of that. Hopefully you guys will enjoy the vid. If you do, show your support, drop a like down below, subscribe to the channel. Also comment down below your thoughts. Let us know, what do you think about the new game mechanics for the stream? What do you think about the part 2 characters? Let us know in the comment down below what do you think about all that stuff. But with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. So 48 minutes on the stream. Of course, they did save the less important stuff for later, which is a really good thing, but the first thing they covered is probably the most important general thing far as the future of Dragon Ball Legends, and that is of course their new mechanics. So basically right now they are giving us a new ground battle kind of system for the whole kind of gameplay. So let me go ahead and go back a bit here. So when you look at the ground system right here, so basically, it is a new area. They're calling it the low area or the surface area. Basically, you can go back and forth on this area and the original area that we have for Dragon Ball Legends, kind of go back and forth into two systems. And I will say right now, I think I remember Dokkan Assets made a post talking about this on Twitter. I wish that the ground battles actually featured the characters being on the ground physically, not just hovering over the ground and kind of flying back and forth, but really on the ground physically, running back and forth, maybe some literal physical side steps or something. I think that would look so clean, but they seem to choose not to do that sort of stuff. Obviously, we're seeing how you can transition between the two kind of levels, if you will. So, you know, the mechanic is really cool. I will say right now, the general, community seems pretty happy about this new mechanic, really hype about it. I've heard some people say that they wish this would show up in part 1 of the anniversary. I've seen some people say, they're using it right now because there's nothing else for part 2. There's all sorts of stuff like that. But I will say, when you think back to the 6th anniversary, right, the anniversary from the year prior, we remember the new kind of mechanic, which was the synchro gauge, that was featured in part 1 of the anniversary with the fusing characters. Now, since then, I have to think back, I don't believe they've revisited that synchro gauge for the most part. The only character who I think kind of reminds me of that is maybe Beast Gohan, but they haven't really revisited that sort of mechanic since then for the most part. But with these new kind of ground battles, I do hope that they will come to revisit this more often. There's so many moments I feel like you could pick and choose from where it would fit this. They said every character can go between the two kind of levels, but some characters will have cards that will be better for these different situations. So all sorts of stuff are to be important to consider there. Obviously, we have some new mechanics like the overdrive attack and stuff. So they are adding a good amount of stuff, I feel like, to this new kind of level system, if you will, for like the whole kind of gameplay. So if they're doing all this work, I feel like they need to actually kind of commit to this. I hope they commit to this because, if you guys have been playing part 1 of the anniversary and everything like I have, I've been playing a lot of PvP. I've faced so many universe rep teams and everything. I have uni reps and everything. I've used Daima, whatever. The gameplay feels pretty monotone right now. It's a lot of passive play, a lot of hunting for perfect vanishes, which you could probably argue is the case in general, but still, it feels really bad right now. I feel like with this whole kind of new dynamic kind of like ground battle system, I feel like that will shake things up and make things a lot more interesting at the bare minimum. So I do hope, things will age for the better, but yeah, they really do need to continue with this kind of focus. I think like there's so much like characters and options and opportunities to pick and choose from to fit this. So really there is a lot of opportunity here, but yeah, this was the first thing they kind of showed us. Obviously a lot of the gameplay for the overcharging, you can see how the gauge works and everything. I really like how they've done with some of this kind of like effects and everything with the key kind of breaking everything. It looks really clean. But yeah, it's really cool stuff in general. But that was the first thing they covered. The second thing they covered was just as important in terms of the time period with right now, because they covered the part 2 anniversary characters. So let's go ahead and just kind of talk about them as we show them. So first of all, we are seeing Sparking Nappa. So this is our 1% sparking, if you will, like the side banner sparking for one of our new kind of main premier part 2 anniversary characters, which, as you probably can guess because it's Saiyan Saga, one of them is going to be Vegeta and one of them is going to be Goku. And it makes perfect sense. You can have Goku without Vegeta and vice versa. If you're doing Saiyan Saga, I feel like it makes perfect sense to have them side by side. But obviously, we have Nappa here. You can plant the Cyberman seeds. You can play as Cyberman. 7th anniversary is going to be pretty insane when you look back on it, because this is going to be remembered as the anniversary that gave us a anniversary level Kaba, an anniversary Cyberman, and as we'll see later, an anniversary Chaozu. Let's just talk about it real quick. When is the last time that we saw Cyberman or Chaozu get legit crazy good representation? I gotta think back. Let me know if you guys remember when that is in the comments below. But yeah, the other Sideband sparking, Tien and Chaozu, I believe they do a tag system here, but obviously, we see Chaozu when he gets destroyed, or when he gets defeated rather, he does his self-sacrifice, you know, to save Tien, does some damage it looks like. So that does make sense with the whole kind of arc, if you will. Obviously, Chaozu gave up his life to save Tien, so I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it didn't end up mattering, let's just be for real, but I'm glad they kind of kept with that focus, because obviously it would be kind of awkward if Tien went down first and all of a sudden you had Chaozu left. But you see the tri-beam right there. The animations look really clean, I will say that. You know, I saw some people saying the animations were kind of mid, but I'm not gonna lie, for Dragon Ball Legends and everything, like, I really do like what they're doing here. Obviously, we see the clash between our two Legends limited characters for part 2, Saiyan Saga Goku and Saiyan Saga Vegeta. The clash looks so clean. I like the posing and everything. I do have to ask though, why are neither of them on the ground? Goku is like barely above like the ground right now, just kind of hovering, and Vegeta is literally in the middle of the air, not even on a rock. I feel like they could have change some things up to make it look better. Obviously, we see Kaioken and everything. You had to have Kaioken with Goku when he's fighting Vegeta. It just makes sense. Vegeta got the explosive wave look and everything, you know, crazy stuff right there. We'll talk about this in terms of like a bit later in the video when we talk about the community reaction, but the community was not really a fan of this overall reveal. There were some people saying like, you know, where's Gogeta? You know, this is an L. It was kind of crazy, but yeah, it is very interesting seeing the overall kind of sequence of how things kind of worked. With Vegeta, we'll see right here, I believe that was supposed to be his revive right there. So Vegeta does actually feature a revive ability, which is really awesome. I think it's been a while since we had our last revive. The last one I recall having a revive was, I believe, Future Gohan and Trunks. So having that is really awesome. Goku, of course, going Kaioken ×3 right here. So yeah, he is bodying Vegeta with these animations. But yeah, I mean, look, you got the solar flare. They did, I think, a pretty decent job with the animations. They look really good in my opinion. Look at that, just choking the opponent. It's gonna look probably wonky with some other characters. I imagine Whis probably will look a bit freaky, because I know what the Whis animation looks like for the character model when like he's taking damage, but this is gonna be pretty funny. So it's got some cool stuff there. I believe that was Vegeta's legendary finish they did. Now we got Goku's right here, obviously with the kick going into the damage. He's gonna, I believe he does the Kaioken ×4 Kamehameha, which is what you had to do. I like the way they changed the pupil kind of focus there. Really good stuff. I think as far as the animations, I will say before we look at what the community says, I think they did a pretty good job on the animations. I think they really did good. Let me know what you guys think, but I think it was pretty clean. I'm not mad at it at all. I really do like it. There are some other things I guess they could have added. You know, some people are really saying, hey, where's Vegeta's Great Ape transformation? Bro has his tail, but he isn't transforming. So there were some people who were upset about that and hoping that that will be a new mechanic. Some people were saying, hey, this will show up in part 3, but in general, I mean, I have no real crazy complaints in terms of how this kind of operated, how it worked. I think it was pretty nice in terms of the character choices. Now, of course, you know, we talk about the characters and everything. They do have different mechanics. Of course, Nappa, we talked about him. He does have the ability to let you play as Cyberman, which again, a anniversary Cyberman is absolutely insane. With Tien and Chaozu, they do have Chaozu doing that self-sacrifice. Obviously, you see stronger strike cards when they're in the lower area, so that's pretty awesome right there. They have a succession kind of ability, so Tien will kind of carry on while Chaozu does some damage to the opponent doing the self-destruct. So I mean, it makes sense, but they just have all sorts of things right there. Of course, it looks like I didn't even realize this. Tien and Chaozu have some paralyze, so for people who are a bit traumatized by the paralyze kind of meta, if you will, with Daima, paralyze is back here specifically, but we'll see later. Vegeta doesn't really care about that sort of stuff. Obviously, we see the animations for them. Vegeta, so the thing about Vegeta, interestingly enough, he does have the revive. We did see that. Also, this card art right here is looking really clean. I really do love that. This might be on some thumbnails for me, I don't know, but this looks really sick. Anyways, besides that, he has a revival. He also nullifies paralyze. He is immune to paralyze. So that is actually very interesting that you have one Sidebander character who can inflict paralyze, but also another character who is immune to said paralyze. So obviously, for people who are like really mad against Daima and stuff, you know, this is like your go-to character. This is the character who is going to be your savior in terms of fighting the paralysis meta. Now, Vegeta, interestingly enough, we'll talk about it later, he is a green type character, which just so happens to coincide with his typing color for Dokkan. So for Dokkan, he's a tech type character. If we go ahead and look at Dokkan right quick, this is the same color scheme as his current kind of Legends kind of model. So I did kind of make a joke about it, but you know, he does seem like they just kind of copy pasted some of the stuff with him in terms of design and concept and everything with the whole color scheme. It's just pretty funny. Obviously, his main gives him a full vanish restoration and everything. What else does it do? I don't want to miss this. He does a blue card pull and everything, and he removes any sort of blue card seals. So yeah, pretty interesting stuff right there. Goku, if I remember correctly, Goku just does insane damage. Like, he just has so like crazy damage potential. He's a red type character, of course, and you know, same thing with Vegeta. Goku fits in line with his Dokkan kind of counterpart, where Dokkan, you know, Goku, he's an STR type, red color and everything. Same thing for Legends. So it really does feel like they kind of copied and pasted some things, which I don't want to like get on Legends' case too much, because I feel like they need everything they can get right now. But yeah, it was pretty funny seeing like the typing and everything kind of coming back to mind, because already when I saw the part 2 Goku and Vegeta, I, like many people, I imagine a lot of people probably thought this, but this felt like a callback saying, hey, do you remember when Dokkan did this for our 7th anniversary? We're going to do the exact same thing because it should work, right? Like, that was like my thought process. I will say, I think from this whole kind of character design and everything, I think these characters look pretty good. I think they, like, part 2 from this kind of specific focus is doing its best to salvage the pieces that were left behind by the first anniversary, or like part 1 of the anniversary, because Part 2 looks cool with the new mechanics and everything. Part 1, a lot of people just didn't like Part 1 in terms of the events, in terms of the meta, in terms of the gameplay. This feels like at least it's going to be more fun, more dynamic, more interesting, and at the very minimum, I feel like that's what players want to have when it comes to a game, is you want to have dynamic fun. You don't want to just be sitting, twiddling your thumbs, waiting to see which character is going to lose their gauge first for their counters and everything, or who's going to have a green card to counter and stuff. Like, I feel like this is going to be more fun in that sense. Obviously, we got, you know, the solar flare and everything. Yeah, different kind of mechanics. Obviously, they're adding some new kind of content, as you will, if you will, like new events and stuff. Obviously, they have some unique animations for Goku versus Vegeta, which is perfect. You know, I mean, it's iconic, so it makes sense. They're adding new questionnaires and stuff. So new events, new things to look forward to. It is straightforward. We are getting, I believe this is a free-to-play Kid Gohan, so I did kind of miss him there, but Kid Gohan is going to be a new character, obviously more Saiyan Saga related kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. I really don't have much to say about Kid Gohan at this point. Like, we already pretty much covered like the important stuff. Got some new content, some champion bonus, some new equipment upgrades, all this sort of stuff. The last thing I want to cover, which is kind of important because this is kind of related to part 2 of the anniversary, we're getting all these chrono crystals, all this stuff, right? The last thing is a new equip. We're getting a platinum equip for none other than Shallot. So Shallot, you know, he's getting an equip. It does make sense because, I mean, you know, this is Shallot's game. This is Shallot's world with Dragon Ball Legends. So it does make sense he's getting a platinum equip. I'm curious to see what the platinum equip is going to offer, but in general, I am kind of concerned in terms of what is going to happen, because the way I'm thinking about this is, all we've gotten from this stream is the new characters for part 2 of the anniversary with the banners. We got the new mechanic, and then we got this, and then we got some events. That's all we have. There were no Zenkais that were mentioned, no equips for any Saiyan Saga related characters. This was pretty much all we had to offer. And then, of course, the last thing they kind of mentioned right here is they're going to be having Shallot show up in Sparking Zero, which, you know, that's all well and good. Having the collab is great, and I mean, Shallot looks really clean, but let's be honest, we're talking about Dragon Ball Legends more so, like, that's the focus right now. Sparking Zero is kind of like doing what it can, but right now I'm more so interested in, you know, Dragon Ball Legends right now in terms of what's going on for the anniversary of Dragon Ball Legends. And so yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what they're going to have going on. The rest of it is just about Shallot, so really there's not much else to talk about there. But okay, let's go ahead and talk about now the general kind of community response, and also just talk about Saiyan Saga in general. So obviously Saiyan Saga being the focal point of, you know, part 2 of the anniversary, that's all well and good. In my opinion, I will say right now, I do believe Saiyan Saga is an anniversary worthy moment, especially Goku versus Vegeta. This is the moment when they start their, you know, iconic rivalry. A lot of people love either Goku or Vegeta, so if you like either of the characters, if you like their rivalry, this is the moment to kind of kickstart it, right? So it does make sense. But when you look at the previous kind of Saiyan Saga characters, right? The last Saiyan Saga characters we got here were like Vegeta and Nappa, those sorts of characters. I'm not the best when it comes to timeline stuff, because I'm just kind of like not that well versed in Dokkan, or not Dokkan, but Legends kind of timelines. But obviously, you know, we look at like the 7003. If you look at the most recent characters we got for the anniversary with UI Goku, he's 8301, right? So obviously, there is a massive gap in the moments from 70 to 83. There's a pretty decent gap since we got our last Saiyan Saga representation. So obviously Saiyan Saga was due for some sort of love. Obviously we got it for the anniversary. And when you look at what's still left on the board for potential Zenkais maybe, or upgrades, I'm looking at Nappa right here. I'm looking at Vegeta right here. Kaioken Goku has the Zenkai, so Vegeta should have one in my opinion. Raditz could have it. This is a free-to-play Goku, so I don't expect it. But hey, I mean, it would be pretty cool if the free-to-play Gokus all got their Zenkais as well, because I think they do need it. And then, of course, you know, you got Raditz, Goku, Yamcha. It would be pretty cool if they got their Zenkais, I'm not gonna lie, or some sort of equip or anything. I think equipment will be really awesome for them. So That's just kind of my thoughts there. Saiyan Saga has a lot of potential, I feel like, but I do need to see more of it, and maybe we'll see some Zenkais. I hope we do, because right now, if it's just the 4 new characters for Saiyan Saga and nothing else, I'm not gonna lie, even with the Shallow Platinum equip, if this is all we're getting, apart from the new mechanic, it feels like part 2 is still maybe a letdown, and it's hard for me to say because part of me wants to say the part 2 is so awesome, trying to pick up the pieces, clean up from part 1, and make this the best anniversary possible at this point in time. But also the other part of me, the cynic part of me, is saying like, hey, what if we didn't have the ground battle in this specific part? What if they decided to show it for part 1? What do we have for part 2? And if you look at what we have for part 2, all we would have is the new characters, the Shallot equipment, the feature of Shallot and Sparking Zero, and some new events, and that's pretty much it. So there is a lot of stuff to consider there. Obviously, you know, when we look at Dragon Ball Legends stuff, you know, you got, you know, like Platypus right here, shout out to Platy, you know, he was saying, you know, like, because a lot of people have been saying that anything pre-Super Saiyan is not hype, especially like Saiyan Saga stuff is not hype. Why is that the case? Because obviously Kaioken, look at how clean it is right now in the GIF and everything. This is from the Kai intro, if I remember right. You know, Kai Goku is pretty clean, you know, like Saiyan Saga Goku and stuff, he's pretty clean, right? So there's no reason, I feel like, and I agree with Platy here, I don't think there should be any sort of like de facto reasoning to say anything pre-Super Saiyan is not hype at all or anything of that nature. Now, if you don't like it as much, that's understandable. Like, I like Super Saiyan and all that stuff way more than I like Saiyan Saga, but I will not be the first person, I will be one of the last people to say that Saiyan Saga deserves no hype whatsoever, because it deserves hype, it deserves recognition and respect. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty good in my opinion. You know, obviously, you know, truth mentioned right here, this is pretty much a copy paste of Dokkan and Legends right there. You got all sorts of stuff right there. There is Dokkan assets as post right there as far as the ground battle. So yeah, I wish they did some like ground movement as well. Anniversary Sidemen, there's a lot of different conversations on this sort of stuff. I mean, there's a lot of different feelings. You know, people are saying the LFs are bad and everything. People are saying we need new equips. I really am kind of like all over the place kind of reading this stuff. This still is a fire shot. Vegeta is definitely aura farming. I do agree with this. He is looking really clean with that. I think that's part of his LF, so that looks really sick right there. But, you know, a lot of people are still saying, you know, like right here, I've never seen a whole skip this part anniversary. They're fumbling this entire thing. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, but part of me does understand where these sorts of opinions are coming from, and part of me is kind of agreeing from a certain standpoint, which is, if you don't care about Saiyan Saga, which some people don't, and that's fine, but it is still hype in my opinion, but if you don't care about it, this is not going to entice you that much. If, you know, the ground battle mechanics, that's accessible to everyone. That's accessible to any character. That could have been introduced in part 3, part 1. It could have been introduced whenever they wanted, and it would have been fine. So when you look at all those sorts of things, there are questions about what are we going to be getting for the rest of this part 2 at bare minimum, especially part 3, because right here, you know, as Shinzero is saying right here, part 1 we had UI Goku, Super Saiyan Blue, Evolve Vegeta and their side banner characters. Then part 2 we have again Goku and Vegeta and their side banner characters, and Goku and Vegeta are hype enough that they are worthy of anniversary, but still back to back is kind of crazy. If we get part 3 Goku and Vegeta, that'd be pretty hilarious. But I mean, it's very interesting how the different kind of players and everything feel about this whole kind of system. A lot of people are excited about the battle system, but like right here, considering its anniversary, he hasn't felt like he has to summon, which is really crazy because, you know, the new battle system, the battle mechanic is going to be forever. That's going to be continuing forward. What isn't going to be continuing is these banners, right? These banners are going to change, you know, they're going to like move on and everything, and yet people don't really care about this sort of stuff, what they did to Super Saiyan Blue Evolve Vegeta. I mean, yeah, it's really bad in terms of, I guess, why, like, what people seem to feel like it's not great. Worst part 2 anniversary, like this, I have to think about this because there were some pretty bad anniversaries looking back, but I don't know if this is the worst part 2, but there is potential if we want to frame it in certain aspects. You know, that was 7th anniversary. It's still garbage. Oh my goodness, I didn't even realize how this was going to get more negativity than I thought. I saw some negativity, but I didn't realize how negative this was going to be right there. PvP speaking for itself. I mean, I'm sure they're talking a lot about like the Sparking Zero stuff too. You see some people in fandom of the Saiyan Saga things, which is great, but other people think it's buns. You know, people are thinking maybe the Ultra or like part 3 will save it. You know, all sorts of stuff. This is actually something I want to kind of focus on here because this is interesting. I haven't seen a lot of Dokkan players really mention their thoughts here, but happy because 7th anniversary finally starting for Legends, and they're getting their first big-time Saiyan Saga rep, which I guess that's actually a pretty fair kind of a point there. But their 7th annie units won't be as unlike Dokkan's were. So yeah, that's true. If we look back at the Saiyan Saga characters for Dokkan, on their release, they were very hyped for part 2 of the 7th anniversary, but they were not necessarily that good. They were just very hyped but disappointing. For Legends, ironically enough, it feels kind of like the opposite. It feels like they're not that hype, but they're probably going to be pretty good. So interesting, I guess, how things have kind of changed, how the tables have turned. But when he finds out, yeah, that's so true. Dokkan and Legends do kind of copy each other when you think about the timing of things, all that stuff. It's fine. I mean, because at the end of the day, they're different games. So as long as they kind of keep with different kind of approaches, then yeah, hoping maybe it's just them withholding gameplay, but watch. Yeah, so there's a lot of different kind of opinions on this sort of stuff. But yeah, I'm curious what you guys think in the comments down below. I mean, for me, I'm happy with part 2. I am kind of concerned though that if nothing else happens in part 2 then will become a fumble for me. I will say that. I'm holding out hope. I think part 2 started off pretty strong with the new mechanics, with the new characters. If there's nothing else, then I have a problem. And of course, you know, we'll have to wait and see what part 3 is going to have to do. I said during the part 1 of the anniversary, part 2 and part 3 need to work their ass off to save part 1 from what has happened for the anniversary. We're going to have to wait and see what's going to happen, but you know, so far the players are not really unified on this sort of kind of aspect. So, you know, hopefully, you know, going forward with the rest of part 2, with the beginning of part 3 and everything, they will find a way to bring, you know, the nations, bring the players together, because yeah, you know, no Giants, no Revival Grade 8, no game originals, no arena change, you know. Yeah, there's all sorts of negative kind of feelings right here, and I hate to see the negativity. I feel bad for players who wanted the anniversary to be really good and they're not enjoying it, but we'll have to wait and see what's going to happen. I'm holding out hope, but yeah, it's going to be interesting for sure. Anyways, yeah, that's going to be where we wrap up the vid. Again, let me know in the comments down below, what do you guys think about the part 2 stream and everything? What do you guys think about what we're going to be getting for part 2 of the anniversary? If you guys enjoyed the vid, again, drop a like down below, subscribe to the channel, show your support. Thank you all so much for watching. Take care, stay blessed, and I will see you all in the next one.